Good day, Oasis family. It is Chanel McCord, and I am so excited to be back with you all today for another Mental Health Awareness Month interview. Today, I am actually concluding the interview series. Next week is birthday week, so I figured that I would even take off next week from doing the interview series so I can really practice some self-care. So I am so excited to be back with you all today. Listen, as you jump on, make sure that you go ahead, that you drop in the comments, let me know that you're here. As you jump on, make sure you go ahead and share the stream. And if you are going to be watching later and you're going to be watching the replay, make sure you hashtag replay in the comments so I can make sure that I go back. And if you have any questions, that I'm able to go back, answer those questions for you. So we started off this interview series with Dr. Angela Pobons, a really good friend and colleague of mine. And we talked about allyship and the difference in how her perspective has evolved over the last year. A lot has happened in 2020, and we're not just talking about the pandemic, right? We had so many other things that happened that were racially charged as well. And so we had really good conversation there. Last week, I had the opportunity of interviewing a colleague, Miss Lori Ford, and we talked about the fatherless heart. And we talked about living life from adulthood to childhood when you have that void of a father in your life, what that meant for you. We had really good, really rich conversation. And she also dropped some resources. And so today I'm excited because I have another one of my therapy colleagues all the way from California. I am so blessed now to have a network of therapists that I know all over the country, right? Not just in New Jersey. We are expanding our horizons. And we're going to be talking today about representation, and that matters. And so as you're coming on in, make sure you go ahead and share the stream. Let's get this word out. Make sure let me know that you're here. If you have questions, go ahead and drop it in the comments. And I'm going to bring my brother in and allow him to introduce himself. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for being here with me today. How are you?
I'm doing fantastically well. How are you doing?
I am doing amazing on this beautiful day. It's a beautiful day in New Jersey, and we don't get Cali weather all the time. So when we get beautiful weather, we take advantage of those days. But I'm so excited to have you here with me today. And as I was thinking about, this was a topic that I definitely wanted to cover today. As I've gotten a chance to know you over the last, I want to say it's been 6 months now. It's been a while now. There was no one else. You were the first name that popped up, and there was no one else that I thought would be great to have this topic with. So thank you for joining me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
So introduce yourself. Tell the people a little bit about yourself, what you do, what your specialties are, and yeah.
Yeah, so my name is James Harrison. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm licensed in California and in Arizona. I mostly work with adults right now, but I have a background in music education. I've worked with children in the foster care system. I've worked with people that have been in the medication management system. I've worked in high schools, elementary schools. I've kind of done a little bit of everything. Like psychiatrists and nurse practitioners, and in the medication management space, and now I have my own practice. I also have a set of flashcards and other products that I utilize to be able to talk about this topic that we have today, which is representation, or for some representation for us, and educational materials and psychoeducation around talking about emotion. But I would say my specialty is working with folks who are wanting to have some better perspective about managing their mood, and also supporting them with having better communication tools when speaking with their partners or even talking to themselves, so that they can have a full and healthy and happy life. So I say that I want for folks to be compassionate, be courageous, so they can live empowered throughout their lives.
Awesome. That is amazing. So I'm going to ask you a question just out of curiosity. You said you have a background in music education.
That's correct.
What came first, music education or counseling and therapy?
Music education came first. So right out of high school, I started my degree in music ed and went to it's a college in Chicago. So I'm originally from Chicago. I left Chicago in 2002 to come out here to Cali, just to I was meandering, I'll say. I was just exploring my life. I was in my early 20s, just kind of doing my thing. But when I left high school, I went directly into music teaching, technically, for this college. So in that school called Vandercook College of Music, they encourage and they provide a program where people can become band directors or choir directors, right? So you learn a bunch of different instruments. You learn
Nice.
up to 17 instruments in your first couple of years, and then the last 2 years you learn how to teach those instruments, and it just kind of puts you out in the field. So I did that for a couple of years after I had graduated, and then through some mentorship, made that transition into mental health. So I utilized a lot of those skills and being able to connect with kids and connect with families inside of music, and it was a great
Nice.
transition into working with families inside of mental health.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, to be able to have like that creative arts background, to be able to pair that with mental health is like amazing, especially when we talk about serving the youth and children, even with adults, to be honest. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
that's awesome. That's definitely
Mhm.
awesome. So I just want to go ahead. Let's just jump into the topic today.
Okay.
We're going to be talking about representation and why it matters. And so the first question I want to have for you is, what is representation? How would you define it? And why does it
Mhm.
even matter?
Representation to me is, I guess it could be a bunch of different things. I'll just start to rattle off some things that kind of come to mind right now, is being able to have something that has value or has meaning to you. There's something that's there that creates a relationship. So when I say that I want something that represents love to me, that could be an object, it could be a person, it could be a feeling, it could be a song, it could be a whole bunch of different things, right? But there's
Mm-hmm.
something about that thing or this entity that that is an experience that I believe resonates with who I am and
Mm-hmm.
how I want to continue to be, or even a mood or a culture or any of those things that I want to continue to maintain in my life that's going to be healthy for me. So that's what and when I think about representation, it's kind of this broad umbrella
Mm-hmm.
of what that can look like.
Right. And so what I hear you say is that basically representation is something that you can hold on to that's relevant, it's relatable, it's something being relevant and relatable, but also helping you through a particular
Absolutely.
situation or particular, like whatever it is that you may be going through, right? And so then
Mhm.
if we take that a step further, then why does representation matter?
Why does representation matter? It matters because we are social folks. Like, I think there's no getting around it. And I think that it's important that as we're being social, that we're engaged in activities, or we're engaged in relationships, or we're engaged in conversation that is going to propel us forward, or it's going to be something that, again, I keep coming back to this place of maintenance, because
Mm,
if we're not maintaining things, and if we're not maintaining things, but there's a place of maintenance and there's a place of destruction and there's a place of kind of progress too, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
For us to be able to keep in mind when it comes to what represents us, because what represented me before may not be what's relevant for me right now, right? And
That's
I
really
might not
good.
be ready for what's going to be in the future for me, but I have to prepare for that right now.
That's so good when you say that. What represented me before may not necessarily represent me now. I think that that is a major point. And we'll jump into, of course, this topic of representation really is more so about minority communities. But I think
Mhm.
as a general overview, it's important to understand that representation may change in your life, right?
Absolutely.
Because your needs change and that you grow. One of the things that I'm constantly working with clients with, and I see this more so as it pertains to relationships and marital things, is that we grow through different phases and stages of our life. But
Absolutely.
sometimes what happens is people get stuck at a certain stage and phase. And so
Mhm.
I'm always used to doing it this way. I think about, my husband would tell me that you change so rapidly. Like, one day you love going to this restaurant, like this is the restaurant. And
Right.
then one day you wake up and you're repulsed by it and you never want to go to
Right.
that. For him, he's just like, I don't understand it. Guess what? I
Mhm.
don't either. I don't know necessarily why our taste change, and there's many different things about it, but I think it is important to understand that part of this journey in life, and as we're talking about wellness and mental health, is that we have to be amenable. We have
Yeah.
to be ever adapting. We have to be
Yeah.
ever adjusting. And
Yeah.
even as service providers, when we talk about representation, even within our own community, we have to make
Mhm.
sure that we're amenable and we're adapting and that we're changing. Because as our clients go through different levels of growth, guess what?
Mhm.
Their needs are going to change. And
Absolutely.
maybe, even at some point, even have to understand, listen, we were working on this one issue. You were good with this issue. Something else popped up. I may not continue to be the service provider for you.
Yeah.
because that may not be an area that I know that I can necessarily help you with in a way that you need it with. And so we've met our goal. And so, yes, other things are popping up, but maybe it's time to move on, you know? And so I think that is such a important point when you talk about what represents me today may not necessarily represent me tomorrow. And so then the question I would ask is, how do you know when representation in your life is changing?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a beautiful question to ask, and I'll approach it like this. In the same way that we're able to recognize the seasons, and it's different here in Cali because we won't have as many seasons as where I grew up in Chicago. We definitely have all four, and I believe that where you are in Jersey, y'all
We
have the
have
seasons.
all four. Yeah.
All four, right? Some of them last a little bit longer than we want to, and it's important to know about ourselves. It's important to observe what it is that we are experiencing so that we know how to adjust. You talk about being amenable, and talking about how to be able to adapt. Like when we are in the season of spring, there's certain things that we know that we can do. And there's certain things that we might have access to, you might not have access to. The same thing in the winter, right? When somebody see the snowflake, that represents to me that it's probably cold. It's not going to be shorts weather for most of us. Some people are comfortable on that, and that's okay. They know how to regulate themselves. They know themselves enough to be able to adapt to, or have adapted to, that kind of thing. The same thing for summer, and the same for other seasons, right? So I think it's important in representation to know what it is that is happening for us right now, so we know essentially how to adjust, over time. So I love what you said earlier too about I guess I interpret it as this maturation that happens for us. And there's another thing that you talked about when and identifying this, the kind of restaurants that you enjoy, the ones that you don't like. And it's like some days I might feel a little bit more salty, and some days I might feel a little bit more sweet, or some days I might feel a little bit of this and that, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with us knowing ourselves in that way, and we can say that, you know what, I've had enough of the sweet in my life, because maybe it's having an impact on me. It's actually impacting my health because I'm having or I'm having too much salt, I'm having too much of something. And I need to change that for myself, so I can look at something and say, you know what, when I see salt or when I see this thing, then I know that I need to take certain actions. I need to either, and it talks, for me, it speaks to boundaries, or it speaks to being aware of when I'm kind of at my limit for something, or what it represents for me, so I know what to trigger. And that could be used in a few different ways, but what it triggers for me to be able to interact with this thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so what I hear you saying is we have to be aware and tuned into ourselves. That's where that introspective work comes in, because I think sometimes, and again, going back to the example of in marriage, sometimes I don't even realize that I've changed.
Right.
Sometimes I don't even have the awareness that I've changed, right? And then there are times then maybe me and my husband are going through conflict, and it's really because something about one of us has changed, and personally have not been able to pick up on that. And so I was not able to articulate that to my husband, perhaps in the way that I needed. So it comes out as, no, I don't want to go to that restaurant. You know what I'm saying? Not realizing, like, you know what, my tastes have changed, my style has changed, or whatever. And so it's important that we are tuned into ourselves, so we actually know what we need. We are the best communicators of our needs, and so often we are passive spectators in our process rather than active in our process. And we can't be passive spectators in our process, and that's where that inner work is so important. Taking time, and even as you talk about as seasons change, my wardrobe changes. You know what I'm saying? I may eat different things in the summer. I'm eating differently than I'll eat in the winter. And really taking the time and being able to sit with that. Like when we pick up on something is different, we don't take enough time to actually sit with ourselves. And that's a conversation I have with my clients all the time. Like, we have to learn to sit with ourselves, because guess what? Just as other people or my husband may getting to know me, I have to get to know myself at different stages and seasons. When I was in high school and I transitioned to college, that was a whole different Chanel. That was a whole different aspect of me. That was a whole different aspect of who I was. And then when I got out of college and I had to get a real job, listen, I had to transition into a different level of adulthood.
That's
And then when I got married, Lord Jesus, like, you know what I'm saying? And so doing that inner work and really being introspective and sitting with ourselves is so important. And we're going to get back to representation, but I really think that this does matter in representation when you talk about even knowing our needs. So this was really good. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And so as we're talking all about that in representation, what does that mean and how does that look like when we're talking about matters of mental health?
So one of the words that came to mind before too are these symbols that we have. I mean, it's goes back to the salt or to the sugar or any of that. But representation, especially when and thinking about getting connected with a clinician or a coach or anybody, there's a hope, I think, for a lot of us to be able to be connected with someone that has a perspective or at least has a knowledge base that would allow for them to understand what kinds of what things are representative of me that I have a connection with, so that in that relationship that we're cultivating together as the therapist or the counselor or the person is getting to know me, I'm also getting to know them. So there's a bond that is being created because of this representation, right? If somebody is not able to understand when I say that, if I use a phrase like "what's good," and they're like, "What do you mean what's good?" I mean, like,
because we know that what's good can mean 1,000 different things.
It could be a lot of different things, right? So it's that, and representation can be in word, but can also be in clothing and just mannerism and all these different things. So if somebody is dressed, proper with a top hat, and they come into the office and be like, "So, who do you think I am if I do that?" But there's can be lots of projections that come along with that. But when I see this thing, then what is my process? What happens for me internally that I'm paying attention to, so that this relationship can become what I need for it to be? But in a therapy space, I'm going to stay with that for a little while. Is I want for this person to know me. I want for them to be able to not, I don't want to say easily understand me, but to be able to have some keys that fit for the kinds of conversations or the place or the direction that I want to be able to go in. Because if I start with some representation that it does not identify with where I want to be able to go in the world, then I'm not gonna say that the person's gonna be lost, but they may not get to where they want to go as fast as they want to go or at the pace that they want to move at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's so important, especially when you talk about in the therapy space, right? Because when we talk about minority communities, and specifically when we talk about Black people of color, we are such a communal people, and culture is everything. And so sometimes you can get into spaces, and let's just be honest, we can talk about healthcare disparities. We can talk about historical trauma and all of those things that have happened where Black people of color and other minority communities have been hurt by these systems that have been set up to help us, right? And so when we lack representation, it's almost like a perpetuation of that hurt. It's a perpetuation of that trauma. And a lot of times, I spend a lot of time just convincing, and I'll use the word convince, that it's okay to seek therapy, because we know that that's a no-no in the Black community. Like we don't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, we don't, you take a nap. you go take a nap or whatever. Exactly.
Don't think about it anymore.
Right. Or think happy thoughts. Exactly. And so it's a big step to get them even in the room. And so then when I get in the room and the room lacks cultural sensitivity, the room lacks understanding, the room lacks knowing, there's no motivation for me to want to do my work.
Right. Right.
And it's so important. And when we talk about representation, even, there's an idea of cultural competency. And I've been recently introduced to the idea of cultural humility. And it's definitely something that I have to delve deeper into. But when that lacks in the room where I'm supposed to get help, it is really hard to be comfortable. It's really hard to convince that it's a safe. And I was challenged last year to go from saying safe space to that it's even a brave space, because it takes bravery. Some people never feel safe. You never actually get to a point of feeling safe, but I'm willing to do the brave work to do
Mm-hmm.
what I have to do to get my healing. And so when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about the sensitivity of that space, the therapy space, it is such a sensitive and it's such a critical space, because what
Right.
I've learned when it comes to therapy, if I have a bad experience with a doctor, I'll go find a new doctor. That does
Mm-hmm.
not happen with therapy. 9 times out of 10, when people have a bad experience with a therapist, they're done.
Right.
They're done. And
Yeah.
if I'm lucky, sometimes I'll get a client who is like, all right, I'm willing to give it one more shot or one more chance.
Mm-hmm.
They may never go back. That may
Yeah.
not always be the case. So being
Yeah.
able to uphold that space and making sure that there is representation, right? And we're
Mm-hmm.
not representation, let's be clear, it's not just skin color.
It's not. Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? What are your thoughts on that? Because I think sometimes when we talk about representation, people only think that we're talking about skin color. Because here's the reality. I could have a Black client sitting on the other side of me and our life experiences are completely different. And representation could be lacking in that room as well. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's a beautiful topic because the Black experience in the U.S. compared to the Afro experience in other countries, well, there's some overlap. Like I may not have the cultural understanding of some like an Afro Peruvian or an
Mm-hmm.
Afro Brazilian or a Nigerian or somebody from South Africa. Like the way that representation is created or that is yet that manifests in that space may not
Mm-hmm.
be what this person needs. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
there can be some, again, some symbolism that comes in where it's like, oh, I see this person looks like me. They probably have had a similar experience of discrimination, but they might have a similar experience of racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
that looks like here and then what that looks like across any of these borders is going to look.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how we articulate that, what we understand about that may not be the greatest. It might not be the best fit. Right. And that's okay.
Absolutely.
It's okay to do that. And it's okay to talk about in that therapy relationship to say, hey, when I say this, this is what this means to me. Right. But it
Mm-hmm.
also takes some courage, like you said, it takes that bravery to be able to even to cross that line, to be
Mm-hmm.
able to have like an experience of being vulnerable enough or to be and you mentioned humility to have that humbleness to be able to say, actually, I wasn't aware of that. And I want to be able to
Right.
learn more of that. But there's also some friction that can kind of come with that because there can be these assumptions that, well, you should have known. Right, because we have the
Right.
same skin tone, or we have the same
Right.
even tone of voice. So when we speak to us, like, oh, like
Right.
because you have this talk, that means that you know this, that, and the other. But just because I'm from the South Side of Chicago doesn't mean that my culture is going to translate to New Jersey. It's going to translate to Oakland.
Right.
It's going to translate to Texas or any other places we are. But
Right.
it's important to be able to, and I say this a lot, to create some shared meaning when it comes to representation.
Yeah. So what would you say to the Black service provider who is serving a client who is also Black, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lack of representation necessarily, like you said, culturally? It could be dialect, it could be understanding of
Mm-hmm.
things, it could be background demographics. What advice would you give to that service provider? Because I think sometimes, and I have to catch myself with this too, again, I really want to harp on that point that just because I'm a Black woman does not mean that I automatically serve representation for all Black women. What
Absolutely.
advice would you give to that service provider?
Be humble. Kendrick, I think was it Kendrick Lamar said it right. He said,
Mm-hmm.
be humble
Slow
about it.
down, be humble, right?
Right, sit down, be humble about it. Don't come in thinking that you know everything about Black folks. I mean, it goes for myself included, but we just
Mm-hmm.
don't. Some people don't want to be called Black. Some people want to be called African American. Some people want to be called something else, right? If it's
Mm-hmm.
Afro this or Afro that, whatever the thing is, like I'm biracial or whatever the thing is that person wants. Like, make an effort to. This is my advice to or my encouragement to a service provider is ask the questions that need to be asked or ask the questions that are curious questions. Like, be curious with your clients. Be curious with who you are serving. Right, that's
Mm-hmm.
almost like whatever the language is that is for the space that we are in, the spaces that we navigate. Get curious with them and ask if it's okay to be curious about a person's culture. Make an effort to learn about it. Don't go in thinking that, well, I know everything,
Right.
because that's when that's when you just there's a disruption in the relationship. Like
Yeah.
you mentioned that somebody will have an experience with a therapist and then never come back again. It's because of stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
because somebody come in and say, well, you should do this because you checked all these boxes, which means that, but the boxes were, and we know about systemic racism, boxes were not meant for us in certain
Right.
spaces, right?
Right.
They were actually meant to
Right.
exclude us, right?
Right.
So if I go through this kind of checklist and say, well, you did this and you did that and you did this, so it must mean that you fit this. I'm going to give you this prescription. But you
Right.
haven't asked me these other questions that are actually much more fitting to me,
Right.
which would, help me to have a better experience and help me to actually meet the goals that I want to be able to have, even
Right.
meeting and showing up, right?
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
that's where the representation is really important inside of the service provider experience, but also the encouragement for them to be curious. Like, is there anything on this list that we didn't cover that's important to you? That
Right.
kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that is so huge, and I think that is so pivotal. I love that idea of be curious and ask the questions, right? Because I think there's something about that curiosity that also, and asking the questions, it also makes me feel like you're taking an interest in me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know what I'm saying? There's something about a genuine curiosity when people ask, like, when you go to other countries or you're exploring other cultures and you ask certain questions, because there's an excitement that comes with really learning, and it shows taking a genuine interest. A
Yeah.
lot of our clients don't have people in their life that take genuine interest in them.
Right.
Don't have people in their life who are willing to stop just to see what is really going on with you, or
Mm-hmm.
how do you identify?
Yeah.
Because everywhere we go, labels are placed on us and identifiers are placed on us. But like you said, just because I represent a certain ethnicity or race or whatever the case is, that does not mean that that is the identifier for me, and that does not mean that's the level or type of representation that I'm actually looking for.
Yeah.
And so we have to, when we talk about do no harm, we have a due diligence to make sure that from the gate, we are in complete understanding of who the client is that is sitting in front of us. Right. And I think that that is a huge part of representation. And so I love the idea of be curious.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you. I would add to that. There's a way to be able to be curious and still pursue respect. Because I can be curious, right? I can ask these questions. Even being curious might be disrespectful to somebody, right? They might say, you asked me too many questions. Why you asking me all this stuff, right? But there's a space to be able to say, so at some point I offer this. At any point during our conversation, if there's something that I say or that I ask you that's disrespectful or that is perceived as disrespect, please let me know.
That's
like
good.
Invite that to them, right? Say, offer that to them and say, like, I want to do what I can, do my part to make this space feel comfortable for you to feel that you can say what you need to say, that you're going to have there's a greater chance of you having your needs met because I'm offering this to you, because people may not know that that's even an option.
Right.
They sit in this chair and somebody's going to kind of continue to question them and ask them all this stuff. But it's like, so can I say what it is that I do and don't want to ask? So it brings in this another conversation about consent. When we're talking to folks, right? Because they may not be ready to have those conversations. Right? They may not be ready to check the boxes or even kind of go over here to say, is there anything over here that you didn't want to respond to? Right. But there's a sensitivity that comes in with those kind of conversations for the providers, but also for clients. It's like, what questions then do the clients get to ask to the providers?
Right.
It goes both ways, right? But we get to educate each other in that relationship.
Right. And that's huge too, because that helps even the playing field too, right? A lot of times there's this hierarchical kind of situation when you think about therapy, and it really is a partnership, right? And technically, not even technically, the reality is the client has the control, right? This is about them, and we're in the passenger seat just trying to help navigate this thing with them. And I think when you do that, and even let them know, like you said, like, listen, if there's something that you're uncomfortable with, or even just be honest with me, giving people the opportunity to even say, I don't want to answer that, or I'm bothered by that, because the reality is we don't get to do that in society.
Right.
You do that in society, it's an issue. You can't do that at work. You can't say, I don't want to answer that question, And so a lot of times people live their life feeling like they're obligated to answer certain questions and be a certain way. And so therapy being the restorative space, being the healing space, to being able to even the playing field and letting them know that this is a true healing and restorative space that's about respect, mutual respect, and unconditional positive regard, and all of those wonderful things. So I think that is so important, and that's so huge too. So thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a a great topic to continue to have conversation about. I think that there was another thing that kind of popped into my mind, and it just left me, but it just kind of centering this. Oh, I know what it was now. There's definitely, at least in my mind, and I don't mean to be separatist in this way, but there's certain ideologies or certain philosophies that come with European standards, and kind of what has been the kind of foundations, what they call the foundations of a mental health, and then what it looks like in different African and indigenous cultures, right?
Absolutely.
Different kind of representation that happens in those places. And that's not to say that either one is better or is worse.
Right.
It just means that there's going to be something that the person may resonate with, that represents who they are, and that's fine. And that's what it represents, and they're able to grow from the experiences and the conversations that come from. That's okay. It's like the bakers get to do their thing, the butchers get to do their thing,
right?
And that's what this represents. And I have a connection with these things. It doesn't make either one of those negative or positive. It is what it is.
It is what it is. Exactly. Good stuff. And so we kind of answered this and we kind of talked about this, but just a little bit more concretely. So what is the detriment of having a lack of representation and a lack of cultural competence when it comes to mental health?
The first word that comes to mind is dissonance, disorder, dysfunction, dis-ease. Like, those are the words that come to mind when there isn't that representation. Because, so if I think about it, I'd say concretely, I think about animals and how they herd together, right? If you take a, I don't mean to be violent. I don't want to be violent today, but this is probably the easiest way for me to do it right now. You take a lion and you put a gazelle, and you were like, y'all need to go hang out together. And the lion's like, oh yeah, you come over here and hang out. That's all good for me. The gazelle's like, oh heck no, I ain't about to go hang out.
Right.
You don't represent my safety. You don't represent anything that is going to allow me to survive, right? Like, you're out to get me. Like, you have to, even the way that I'm able to function, like, and I think it really speaks to the Black experience, right? Because we're participating in these systems that are not meant for us. Right. In lots of ways, not to say that everybody is, but in the manner of, if I'm going to participate in something, I want to know that you have my best interest in mind, at least somewhat. But I know that this lion definitely does not have my best interest in mind.
Right.
But if you put me, a gazelle and a zebra, we might have some more things in common. We might have a common enemy, but we know that we can kind of get along together more or less. But if I get closer to somebody who looks like me and behaves like me and knows my culture, we got gazelle and gazelle, we're gonna be good. We likely gonna be okay. We might have our different traumas. We both might have seen a lion here and there. Like, oh yeah, I remember that time.
Right.
We have some shared experiences that we can talk about. But I think it's important to be able to have the representation that allows for us to, again, have that sense of safety, and that has that common experience or has that shared meaning, so that there can be more things. It's not to say that we can't learn from the lion. Right. It's like, oh yeah, they're able to move in this way. And that's actually really good. Like, I need to pay attention to that. Maybe I can incorporate their speed. I need to incorporate the way that they take care of themselves. I can observe that from a distance, but doesn't mean I need to go and hang out with them.
Right.
That's different.
Yeah. And so what I hear you say is, foundationally, representation is about safety.
It's about safety. Absolutely.
Foundationally, representation. When there's representation in a room, there's safety in a room. I feel like I can grow. I feel like there's a sense of I can do the brave work. I just think that was just a great way of putting that, right? The lion automatically has the power. And so I walk into the room as the gazelle, and I'm automatically fearful. I'm keeping my mouth shut. I'm automatically, because power is sitting across from me. And we have learned, when power is sitting across from you, we shrink back. Right. I think that is such a great example. Representation equals safety. If I take nothing else away from our conversation, I will take that. No, seriously, I'm going to take that to the bank. Representation equals safety. That's good.
It can look very different. I mean, I think even in that example, I'm going to play with it because I love analogies in lots of ways. But it's an old, I guess I'm going to say a very mature lion. It's not going to be moving much. It's just going to be sitting there. I'm going to have a different experience. But if it's one that's very young and it has no reference for care for others.
Right.
then I'm gonna be like, oh no, like this one is wild and loony. This one's gonna come out to get me. Well, this one is like, it's kind of in hospice, so to speak. It's like, oh, I can probably be over there. You know what I mean? Not to put it out there, but
Right.
you understand what I'm saying. Like there's a different way that I'm gonna feel in the room or feel in the space if I
Right.
see that this person potentially has a little bit more experience, or they're
Right.
in a place that they can't move as fast, so there's no threat to who I want to be or how I want to move. Right?
Right.
There's gonna be a different
Right.
experience. Not to say that we can't cohabitate. Right, because I'm like, oh yeah, like
Absolutely.
you all right. You can, if you did decide to do something, you're not gonna be able to keep up for very long. Like,
Right. Right. Right.
it makes a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. That's, that's really good. I love that example. I'm gonna make sure I keep that in mind. I'm gonna make sure I go back and run that. I'm just letting you know right now. I'm gonna give you credit, but I'm gonna use it. I'm just letting you know, so don't be surprised.
It's all love. It's all love, 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 love.
Right. So, kind of, to kind of round out the conversation, if you are a service provider and you are serving a population that doesn't represent your race or that doesn't represent your religion or whatever the case is, how can
Mhm.
you still be an ally and represent well?
That's a good question. I think that it's important to have, and I say balance, or it's important to have some semblance of I was going to say homeostasis, but there's also this sense of like kind of ebb and flow, because you get to spend a certain amount of time with people that you want to advocate for,
Mm-hmm.
and you also have to find time to advocate for yourself. I
Right.
I think is so this is, I'm going to try and do this succinctly because I can get long winded with some stuff. But I when I did my graduate school degree in social work, I was also in a school where all the classes were taught in sign language. So I was then an advocate in the deaf community, right?
Wow. Okay.
So I'm coming outside of myself because I'm a hearing Black male participating in a primarily white institution that is focused on deaf and hard of hearing culture, issues, and representation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
there in this space. It's their space. I'm a
Right.
participant in that space, and there's Black folks in that space. There are people that look like me in this space. But then I also have to do things that take care of who I am as a person, which would include different kinds of just different activities, right? But
Yeah.
I'm experiencing activities that are in alignment with who they are, but also need to do things that are in alignment with who I am, right?
Right.
We can
Right.
connect. We can even. I mean, I think that there's just kind of break down some of the stereotypes really briefly here. But they might be a stereotype that deaf and hard of hearing folks don't enjoy music or dance or those kind of things, and that's actually a
Mm-hmm.
place where a lot of a good number of those community members thrive in, right? And we can
Right.
connect, right?
Right.
And I get to also do that, but I might experience it in a different way in other spaces, right?
Mm.
Different kind of music because of the timbre of the sound or even the volume that music is being listened to at, right? But I think that I can
Absolutely.
be there in that space and say, yeah, I can be here and advocate and I can do all the things here, but I also need to find time that's going to be a lot for me to be at peace with myself. That's going
Mm-hmm.
to be different from, maybe even, again, there might be some overlap with that, but I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, but also taking care of, if I want to advocate for somebody else, to know what the difference is for that. That
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah, it does. What I loved about what you said is you said that recognizing that I'm a participant in their space.
Uh-huh.
And I think that is so huge, recognizing that you can still be a service provider of a different culture, of a different background, and still be able to do good work if you recognize that I'm a participant in that person's space. And I think
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, I'm just coming out of working in a school, in Camden, New Jersey. I don't know if you've heard about Camden, New Jersey, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a pretty tough area.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what will happen is that these service providers will come into the school and try to make the culture what it is that they wanted, rather than, as you said, recognizing that they are a participant in these kids' space. And because
Mm-hmm.
what would happen is there was a lot of insensitivity, cultural insensitivity that was happening, such as, people would talk about, the neighborhood and the safety, and yeah, I don't eat around here. I hurry up, I go to work, I hit the highway, and I go home, recognizing that we're saying all of these things in front of these kids, but this is their reality. They live
Mm-hmm.
here. They don't get to escape the dangers of the street. They
Right.
have to eat at these restaurants. They have to play in these neighborhoods. They have to walk these streets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is that we weren't seeing our children grow. We weren't seeing our kids grow. And there was a lot of rifts between certain, if I can be honest, staff members and the children because of how they viewed that space. And recognizing that I'm coming into your space and I'm going to respect this space. No matter what my thoughts were about it, we have to be sensitive to the fact that even like we said before, even if I have a Black woman to sit on my couch or I have a Black man to sit on my couch, I am coming as a participant in your space. You set the tone and we're going to write it out that way. I think that is so huge. And it's a missing art, especially when it comes to being a service provider, a service provider of any place. Understanding a service provider means that I'm serving. And when I serve, I don't serve according to what my needs are. I don't serve according to what my comfort level are. When you are really serving, you serve according to what the other person needs. You serve according to what it is that they're looking for. You serve according to that, not according to what we need. And so I think that that is such a huge understanding that I don't care who you are. If you are a service provider, whether it's mental health, you're working in a hospital, you're a nurse, whatever it is, we are participants in those people's space. And that is where a level of mutual respect comes in. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute perfect sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And so I know, part of the work that you do, representation, I know matters for you, right? Tell us a little bit about some of the resources you have that you've created and why you created it, as it pertains to representation.
Absolutely. So I started my journey into mental health in 2005. I did an internship at UCSF, and then I kind of catapulted myself into the social work program. But it wasn't until 2010 that I was providing services before that, and I was working in schools on the East Coast. So I did my graduate degree in DC, and then I did some internship in Maryland, and then I was kind of doing the circle in DC where I was working and doing kind of case management stuff. But it was when I came to back to California in 2010, then I was working in the foster care system, working with families, doing family reunification work and doing individual therapy, family therapy, and trying to use these tools that were basically these emojis to be able to connect with kids with. And they were like, yeah, we see emojis on our phone, but that's not really who they are. It's nice to kind of have something that's playful. I mean, it has something that's kind of cartoony and that kind of stuff. And kids enjoy that kind of experience.
Right.
But for me, that just wasn't enough. So I had in my mind, like, we need to have something that looks more like us. And I'm not sure what it's like on the East Coast, but I wasn't making a whole lot of money as an intern trying to get my hours.
Same.
So, that financial foundation wasn't there to do that. And I think also in social work, for me in school, they're not teaching entrepreneurism. They're not trying to teach folks how to own their own business or to raise capital or fundraise or other kind of things outside of an agency spot. So I say all that to say is that I've had this idea for many years, but didn't have a way to be able to make it happen. So I created this. I started with flashcards. It's called Family You All Right. It's a 72 card deck that has 30 expressions. I'll show the expressions in a moment here. 30 expressions, and then it has the names of the expressions on the back of the cards, but also in Kiswahili. So there's an opportunity for people to see an expression and to see a representation, at least in word, of what that expression can mean. But it doesn't mean that this is the end all be all for that, right? So I'll show you one really quick here, just so that your folks can see, and I'll try and pick one that is a little bit, she's a good one to play with right now. So this is my girl, and everybody might say, well, what does she look like? She might look a little frustrated, might be angry, she might look something, but you can turn it around, you can see the English word at the bottom. We've identified that as being frustrated, and then you have a representation at the top in Kiswahili, which is fadhaika. So that you can have an opportunity to hear that emotion or hear that expression in a different language. So I didn't want to stop there. I wanted to be able to have some conversations about what these expressions can mean or what we can talk about. So if I use one of the prompt cards, and there's more than 30 prompts in each deck, then they get to answer some of these questions or insert the words inside of here. So using the cards statement, I'm more likely to feel frustrated when, and then I would fill in the blank with, when am I more likely to feel frustrated? When I'm not getting my needs met. It will be a response. Like, I've been trying to do this thing, I've been trying to get this homework assignment done, but I feel frustrated all the time, but I don't know what to do. So this would be a conversation to have with a parent, with a caregiver, with a teacher, with a therapist, right? So that these things can continue to happen. So there, again, this is something that I created with my family members, actually. So one of my cousins did the design for the figures, but I collaborated with some other mental health clinicians to be able to come up with some of those prompts so that there can be more of those conversations. There is the representation in different images. So this is a poster that we have that has all three on it. So it's different skin tones. This is all in English for the time being, but the idea is that we want to be able to recognize ourselves in the materials that we use for us. And that to be something that we can easily relate to. We're not like, oh, it doesn't really represent me. I don't know. That's nothing. There's nobody on there that I can connect with. We want to have more of that. I think images matter. I think the content matters, and we look at how we're represented in media, especially. That we have been represented in a positive light. Like I think early on, me growing up, there's a lot of gangsters, a lot of people that are like streets and this and the other, that we didn't see people in positions that gave a sense of hope, or the struggle, or the character development really didn't give a sense of like, I can do this, right? And that can be the consistent message. So I'm hopeful that with materials like these and other ones that we produce, will offer that sense of connection, of representation, of community, so that we can be all right. Because it's okay to not be all right, and to say what I can do, or what we want to be able to do, so that we can be in a place where we're feeling good about ourselves. And if we're not, what are the steps that we can take in order to be more at peace? If that's what we want for ourselves. But really to be able to identify that and create the space to identify language, because somebody might say, I'm okay, I'm fine,
I'm good,
whatever, But let's identify that. Let's talk about that with each other. Let's get specific. It's okay to do that. So we can actually create, again, have that shared meaning. Because if somebody says that they're bored, or if they're hungry, or they're excited, like, I want to be able to adjust to that. I'm like, that's too much for me. You're too excited for me. I need to go and like build myself up to that, or something. Like, I need to take a break from this. It's too much for me, and that's okay to have these boundaries.
I think that's awesome on so many levels, to be able, because I think sometimes, especially when I was working in school and working with the kids, it was predominantly Hispanic and African American. And being that way, everything we did, there was no, I'm thinking about the charts and stuff that we use, there was no representation on that, And so what you've created literally allows a child, it allows a family to look at that and see that, okay, this is for me too. Mental wellness is for me too. Feelings are for me too. Because I think especially, and I won't jump on this point for too long, because this is something that I could talk about all night, but I think that what sometimes happens, especially in minority communities, is that we're not allowed to feel. There's this thought process that, we're strong, or, we don't have feelings, or, that we could really get into that conversation. But to be able to pull out a chart like that and being able to show it to some of the kids that I work with, or for families to be able to sit in the living room with their children and bring out the chart, and I can really see me. And so it helps me to identify with the work at a different level, and the work on another level, which I think is so huge. That's so huge. And I love that you created it in such a way that this is not just a tool for service providers.
It's not.
It's not a tool just for service providers. This is a tool for families. If you've been looking for a way, if you're a family and you've been looking for a way to connect with your children, or how to have conversation with your children, there you go. You have a conversation starter. You have a jumping place, a starting place, at least for that. And so if anyone wanted to get any of your products, how would they be able to do that?
The best way to get the products is online. So that they go to www.famyoualright, and that's spelled FAMYOUALRIGHT.com. It's a webpage that has all the products there. Right now, there's the flashcards, there's a poster, there's some hidden hoodies in there too somewhere, but we can get it in a bundle, kind of get everything together. But we have some more things in store. I'm looking forward to the rest of this year. I can't wait to announce some of these things as soon as everything is approved. But I'm looking forward to making it just on and pop in for a lot more folks. I'm just going to say that.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it, definitely. And I'm definitely going to be ordering my cards and the work that I do, because I think it's just so pivotal to have that. So thank you, for creating it. It's such a simple gesture it's just a powerful legacy, for our people. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for having this conversation. For some people, I can't have this conversation with everybody. This is a hard conversation. I think it's a confrontational conversation, but it's a necessary one, especially in this day and time when mental health is becoming more necessary. And I hate saying that because mental health was always necessary. But I think last year has taught us, and it opened up the window for us to really see it. And so while we have more and more people that are doing the brave thing, and while they're seeking the services, I'm grateful, for service providers like you who are able to stand up and have the hard conversation so that we can make some changes, and that we can make sure that as we're serving and as people are stepping out and they're putting their pinky toe out, right, to do the brave thing, that we're able to serve them well. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I had one question I wanted you to answer. Somebody asked before we jump off real quick. We had mentioned earlier learning to sit with yourself, and someone asked to explain what does sitting with yourself mean?
Yeah, that's a really, I think it's an important question. It's a heavy question, because I say it's heavy because, and it's light, it's lots of things. Because when we're sitting with ourselves, we get to observe, we get to kind of be in silence. It doesn't mean that we have to be meditative about it. It's being able to allow for ourselves to see what we see. Right. As I'm sitting in my space, I can either look at what is literally physically that I can touch and can put my eyes on, or I can close my eyes and kind of sit in that so-called darkness and notice the thoughts that start to come up for me. I don't have to do anything with them, and that's the sitting part. This is the really juicy part of it. This is my word for the month, is juicy. When we sit with it, then we get to notice what we want to do with it, even without having to do it. Somebody might say, like, I need to go to the grocery store. And I sit with them. I think about what is it that I need from that place. I haven't actually gone there yet, but I know that I'm preparing to go and do that thing. So it allows for me to prepare, but also get to observe.
I love it.
You know what? Let me think about what's already in the fridge that I need, or what's in my pantry, or what's in the thing. Like, what is it that I'm needing? So we get to have the same conversations with ourselves to say, when I sit here, what do I notice is happening with my body? Is there any tension there? Is there anything that feels really comfortable to me? Am I hot? Am I cold? Am I like, what is it, something vibrating fast for me? And if that's my experience, do I want for that to continue, or do I need for that to change so that I can have my needs met? Right. But if I don't take time to do that, then, and I'm on autopilot, and I don't notice these things are of dis-ease for me. And I don't mean that like an ailment necessarily. It can be that, but I'm not noticing that something is causing me hurt. And I don't even know that I need to look for it. Then later on, I'm going to have an experience that is really uncomfortable.
Wow.
So it's important for us to take a moment and just kind of sit and observe and say, what am I experiencing right now? What can I pay attention to? And I think, you have experience with progressive muscle relaxation and those kind of things. You're to say, like, if I squeeze my hands really tight and I let them go, can I feel the blood rush back into my hands, or can I not? And if I can't, does that concern me? If I do, is that a good thing? Some of those things, to play with those sensations, play with those tactile experiences. So I encourage folks when they're sitting with themselves to do at least 4 things: to notice what's happening with them biologically, what's happening with them psychologically, so the thoughts that are happening for them. If there's people, and this is the sitting with, when I pay attention to the people that are around me, how does that make me, what feelings come up for me? What's the sensation that comes up for me when I'm around certain folks? If I'm sitting with myself and I'm observing who I'm around, what does it look like for me? And folks who have a spiritual practice, what's happening for me in my relationship with my higher God, my power? What's that relationship looking like? So when somebody asks me, like, how do I sit with myself? Focus on one of those 4 things. I would encourage starting with the biological first, and then the other 3.
Awesome. That's a great answer. I honestly probably one of the best answers I've ever heard as it, pertains to what does it mean to actually sit with yourself. I think that
Mm-hmm.
really gave a good understanding, and understanding that it's a non-judgmental space. It's a non-judgmental space. It's a space of just about being rather than having to be moved to action. So awesome. Thank you for answering that. I hope, Ambria, I hope that answered your question, and that gave you some insight on what it means to sit with yourself. So again, James, I thank you so much for being here with me tonight. It's nighttime for me. I know it's not quite nighttime for you yet. So I thank you. Not going to hold you up for the rest of your day. Thank you so much. Make sure that you guys go to the website, www.famyourright.com. Make sure that you get your resources. We want to make sure that as we're serving well. But also, if you're a family and you're looking for a way to deeper connect, this is an awesome opportunity for you to connect. And so I hope that this conversation was good for you guys tonight. Again, if you're watching, show us some love. Make sure that you go ahead and that you share so that we can get the word out. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'll definitely go back later and, figure out how I can answer whatever questions. If there's anything that's specific to James, I'll make sure he'll get these questions. And if he has some time, maybe he'll be able to get back to us. But I thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope that you guys have an amazing day, and I will be back with you soon. And I'm just going to say happy birthday to me in advance because I can do that because it's my birthday next week. You guys have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Peace out.